So is this too loud? No? Okay. Sounds good. So this is our agenda for today, but we have some flexibility. So don't feel like you shouldn't ask questions or anything like that. We want it to be interactive, right? The whole point is let's learn something together, let's work together. And I guess some quick housekeeping. There's water over there, so you can get water at any time. The bathroom, if you leave out this door and look to the right, you'll immediately see bathrooms. There's clear signage up high, right? And then it's really right across, right down that hallway. So, from a housekeeping, I think that's it. Anything I missed from a housekeeping? Oh, coffee. Yeah, coffee, tea. So I guess when you came up the stairs, I'm sure you saw a little kitchen area, right? That's where coffee and tea are. There are drawers that say cups. So you open the drawers, those are the cups. Perfect. Anything else missed? All right. So we'll jump in. We're going to start with just a quick overview. And so I just want to set a little bit of context of what we're going to be talking about and doing today. And apologies that it is going to take a little while for the transition. I'm not quite sure why. But we'll be patient with that. But basically, everybody here is implementing and doing DevOps, right? Like that is a practice and a standard. It's established and it's important because we want to make sure we can get things through the system quickly. We can get it through the system with quality. And we can, make sure that we're delivering what we need to our customers. We know what's in our release. We know what the predictability is, right? All of that is something we want to do. And just as an FYI, sit anywhere with a gift. There's water over there. We'll show you the kitchen if you want tea or coffee. And there's bathrooms out this door to the right. All right, so there, makes sense, right? We all understand that that's what we're trying to do and achieve. But what we see in practice is that it gets us to a point, and then we typically either plateau, right? We have to increase some level of skill. There's some sort of bottleneck or challenge in order to get to the next level of efficiency. The idea of being able to release as frequently as we would like to release with the speed we want to release without diminishing quality is somewhat elusive. We haven't yet worked through all of that. Now, you could argue some people have, but I would argue most large organizations have not gotten to that point. Some teams may have, but there may be different dependencies, right, that they have with other teams. And so we have to understand those bottlenecks. Now, some of these we've seen other organizations and have recommendations on how to improve it. Some of these we want to work with you as well, right? You may have ideas. There's not a one answer here. Right? Anyone offering you the silver bullet probably is just very excited about what they do, but that's not true, right? We want to help you solve the problems, and we realize there's different strategies depending on the types of problems that you're seeing. And so that's why we really want to help you think through that. And so hopefully this will be very collaborative. Now, we do work with a lot of organizations, and based on what our offerings are, how we help organizations, we do see these as problems that they have and areas that we've been able to help our customers, right? The first having to do with getting the right type of data into your environment to be able to test your lower environment, but ensure that you're compliant with any sort of regulatory needs, that you're not introducing personally identifiable information, but that the data is robust across different heterogeneous systems. We want it to be, you need to make sure that's intact across those different systems because that data will be used at various points. You need to make sure that it has and covers all your edge cases, your negative scenarios, etc. And so that can be a bottleneck in many systems, right? We also see how can I make sure that my lower environments have end-to-end capabilities, right? That I have true production-like environments. That means third parties, and it means that I would be able to have the type of network that I would expect. It means that if I'm dependent on mainframes or ERP systems or some complex systems that I can't always bring up, I'm across multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, and I don't always have all those systems available or other people are using them at the same time, right? How do I make sure I have true production-like environments for my end users? And for my end users could be different, right? I may have integrators that have their environment, and it needs to match what I'm actually working on, right? So this is another area that we see organizations really struggle with. Obviously, any sort of manual process in the system makes it difficult, right? We want to make sure things are automated as much as possible because that allows for increased flow. Oh, is this okay? If you have questions, you can ask in the microphones, or you can just kind of get up and grab at any time. And so we want to help reduce that, but we also want to have the visibility, right? There are certain processes that organizations say, well, I need this sign off. I need to make sure, things are done. And whether they can be automated, like security scans and other things, right? Or whether they have manual checkoffs that certain things have happened, which unfortunately still exist, right? You need to have visibility in the flow, how things are working, as well as what's taking you a long time, what's really holding you up. That visibility allows you to understand that. It also allows you to understand dependencies between releases and understand whether or not you're following the same quality and procedural standards that you would for those releases. And then obviously, actually automating your tests, right? Having the right level of test coverage. Or sometimes what happens is they don't understand where a change impacts the system. So things that are not necessary are being over-tested, right? But that's not where defects are going to be. And things that are necessary are being under-tested. And so it's how can you understand, prioritize the tests that are most likely to break so that I can get that feedback sooner. Because if a regression test takes, let's say, a day or two to run, right? You've got, even if it's automated, if you have a lot of tests, it can take a long time. How can I prioritize the right tests come first so I find those defects faster? So it doesn't continue the flow through the system. And so making sure you have the right type of testing, you know what to prioritize, you know where the problems are going to be, is really important. And getting that to an automated level can also be difficult, especially if the system is complex and there may not be a lot of automation already in place, right? So these are some of the challenges that we see. Any thoughts or feedback? Oh, yeah.
I think very fair challenges. So just wanted to understand, like, as Gen AI is coming into picture, so is it like we can expect the landscape for DevOps or the way we are doing the DevOps in today's world is also changing, like, or any thoughts about that? Because we are quite bullish, like everyone is quite bullish that, okay, we need to do something in that AI space, and whatever work we are doing from DevOps perspective, we are trying to automate it from Gen AI, like switching the rails, moving to one environment to another, test data management and whatnot.
So absolutely. We are actually, so I'm going to kind of hint at a little bit of what Abhijit's going to share. He's going to share part of our roadmap he's going to cover, we won't have time to cover the whole roadmap because we want to also cover some topics, but he is going to be primarily talking about some of our thoughts around Gen AI. And where we're taking it. This is active, work that we are doing as well, right? We do see the landscape of DevOps changing, and so we want to provide that context of what we're thinking. We will get to that, so good point. So this is what we're doing. Oh, well, soon this is what we're doing, which is basically what we're trying to do is empower customers to do these types of things, accelerate their time to market by having those production-like environments, right? Mitigating security and operational risks, making sure we elevate the quality, enhancing reliability. We'll talk about all of these very briefly, and then I'll pass it on so that we can get into some of the fun things like the Gen AI and some of the capabilities in our product. But the production-like environment environment, on-demand environment, is incredibly important, right? How do I make sure that I have different third parties, that I have different plugins, that I have environments for my integrators, and have the right data to back them? And typically what we see is we can help support customers in that area. Obviously, things like decoupling, microservices, cloud infrastructure does a lot to help us get there, but it's not a full end-to-end environment. It's not necessarily performance, so that I can do my performance test early on a single component, right? I need to have, and that would be very expensive to probably bring up in scale. I may have different clouds. I may not have all the connectivity I need. I may have things that are still located on-prem. How can I make sure I have that full production-like environment? And so this is where we see that using Test Data Manager and service virtualization to simulate the behavior and have the right data to back it is really helpful for organizations to make it easier. It also allows you to test scenarios that you might not be able to test in your live environment. You know, you might have data coming back out of order. You might have certain edge cases or air conditions that you want to simulate that you might not be able to easily reproduce in the real environment, but you certainly want to make sure that it works before you actually bring it to production. We talked a little bit about Test Data Manager as well, and this is where we also want to think about how can I have secure data in my non-production environment? How can I make sure that I have not introduced anything that is PII, that would cause any sort of regulation to look at that and be concerned? And there's a number of reasons. First of all, we know that data breaches, right, are not only being targeted at production environments. They target non-production environments because guess what? That data is not always compliant. People will either know or not know that that data is there, right? Some people do it and it's not good, but they know that they've done it, right? And some people will get these exceptions, right? This is too complex for blah, 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 blah. So I get this one-time exception for this one test, and then they run it, right? And then they remove it. But it's still a huge risk, right? The fines of having that data there are huge, but also if it happens, right? Customer trust and loyalty, brand, right? That's impacted as well. So it's really important to make sure that that risk isn't there. But if we remove that risk, how do I make sure I've got the right data that I need across my whole entire system, which is probably, heterogeneous, and I need that referential integrity, right? That data is true across the system. And this is where we have a number of different techniques with Test Data Manager, which I'm sure we'll go into more around both masking synthetic data generation, being able to subset the right kind of data that I'm interested in, being able to have some self-service. So once I have certain established processes, people that maybe don't know as much about the data are able to use it. And we'll talk about that more. We also, this is a capability we're not going to talk about quite as heavily, but if it's something you're interested in, we're happy to talk to you about it more, which is around that end-to-end visibility. So obviously, CI pipelines have helped us understand what's in an environment, right? How can we release to the next stage? But how do I know, for example, if there's a code commit on something that I thought was a feature that was already done? What kind of risk does that put to my release? How do I know across my different releases what those dependencies are? How do I know if I am following the same quality standards, that I've met every single quality standard that my organization sets? This is something that our continuous delivery director really helps you get the end-to-end visibility, and it's really focused on that CD part. It does allow you to also see the CI, but most people have their CI very much established, which is good. But it's the other pieces that go in the interdependencies, and having that clear visibility and knowing right away if something has passed or not passed and what you've done, right? What kind of testing you've done to make sure that all standards are met. And that means across just, functional, performance, security, et cetera, right? There's a lot of pieces to that. And oftentimes, those are sort of managed in a lot of separate systems, and it's attempted to try to dashboard it together. But this allows you to both automate and have some manual sign-offs if required. And then we also want to look at enhancing your reliability, optimizing that test coverage, making sure that defects are found earlier in the system. And this is where we look at our Agile Requirements Designer, which is really a model-based approach where you're modeling out the system. You can understand if an area has changed and be able to change what that model looks like. It auto-generates the tests. You can assign automation to it. So basically, now you're not managing thousands and thousands and thousands of test cases, and now something changed and I have to figure out what test cases to change. I'm managing the model, and it's you can use whatever. It's agnostic to the automation framework, so you can use whatever automation framework you want, and it will regenerate the right tests. It will regenerate the automation, and it's pretty impressive. I'm going to kind of skip ahead just for a time perspective. And there's an airline that I'm aware of that it was for their air ops, and they had no automation, and it used to take them 18 to 24 weeks to be able to go through their testing and they didn't actually understand had they tested all the scenarios they needed. They had no idea what their coverage was either. They went to 6 to 8 weeks. Now, it's been a couple years. Today, they are 100% automated. So it doesn't take weeks, right? But this was upon an initial, kind of like a 3-month POC, right? They were able to streamline that far. But today, they're completely automated. And they're expanding the teams that use it beyond that, and they're looking at making it organizational wide because they're getting so much value. But it is a transition. It is they have to put in the work, right? But it has allowed them to really streamline their processes and have clear automation around some really complex scenarios that they had tried previously to do multiple times with automation, and before coming to us had almost given up. We also see, a lot of customers getting benefit across our other solutions as well. But I'm sure we're going to get into that. I want to make sure that my colleagues have enough time to present. So before I hand it over, any last-minute thoughts, feedback, questions for us? Are you going to be shy, or will you speak up? I'm sure this is an overview, so it's okay. But I'm sure as we get into some of the details and the capabilities, we do want to hear your voice, okay? Awesome. All right, so Raghav, I think we're going to switch. Let me stop sharing.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks, Beverly, for the DevOps overview. So my name is Raghavendra Shirali, and right now we are in the agenda of test data management, test data manager presentation. Along with me, Abhijit will be covering few of the aspects of what is coming in the test data manager roadmap, which obviously I believe it is very interesting to listen from him. So let's start with the test data manager. So I'm sure in our school days, college days, right, whenever teacher has given a homework, so we would have come up with some excuse that something went wrong with my homework, right? I was not able to find my homework. So this seems that similar way when we are not able to find the right test data for our test cases, we come up with excuses. Okay, the test data is already excused, or I do have a test data, but it doesn't cover all the scenarios, right? So what happens next? So if you don't find the right test data, we'll get testing gets delayed, or we'll get frustrated. Where do I get the right test data? Right? So we'll try to understand how can we, solve this bridge and what our solution can help us. So with the DevOps coming to picture, testing plays a very important role. I believe you all understand that, right? And when it comes to testing, again, the test data is also important. While organizations are trying to, adopt the test data manager or test data management practices, we see from the couple of, organizations, the challenges they face while implementing the test data management comes in the 4 categories. One is the data compliance, right? How do I make sure that my sensitive data are not exposed to the testers from the production to non-production environment? The next one is data quality, and I just talked about in the previous slide. Do I have the quality of the test data to cover, right? The next one is finding the data. So obviously, since we're all working for the big organizations, we see a lot of operations challenges when we want to access the data. Either we have to fill the Excel sheet, give to the DBA along with the queries. Okay, these are the queries you execute, and what they do is they simply execute the query and gives the dump to you, right? So finding the test data is also a challenge. The next one is, how do I get the data? I data in a particular format. Maybe my automation script is using a test data in a CSV format, or I need a data in a database where it queries. So again, the delivering the right test data to support my testing activities is also important. Just to put up some of the the figures from these various surveys comes, 52% of the teams are dependent on the DBAs to get the right data, right? And similarly, creating the test data manually, right? I need a test data. Someone sits and 4 or 5 columns. I'll put some rules and I'll generate the data, right? So still we are doing 44% of them. So when it comes to our CA test data manager, right? So we see from 2 aspects. One is the entire test data management practices, right? Identifying the relationship between the application databases and finding the sensitive data with an audit process, so that my internal and external auditors can validate those PII data masking. How do I mask the sensitive data? How do I subset the data, right? We don't want entire production data. I want some subset of the data from the production, right? Next, synthetic data generation and data cloning. So all this, the industry standard TDM practices can be, is supported by our test data manager. So when we have these practices, so what all the landscape we support, right? We support from the legacy mainframe IBDB2 to the latest, to the greatest nowadays, the cloud databases like NoSQL, MongoDB, BigQuery, and Cassandra. And when these application databases are there, it could be on the on-premise or it could be on a cloud, right? Test data manager can be deployed as an on-premise solution, or it could be deployed on a VMs or a Kubernetes as well. When we have these setups, it can securely connect to all these application databases, so that even the data at the transit is secured. Any questions? Good? Okay. So we talked about 4 key areas where one of them is the most important is the data compliance, right? So nowadays a lot of data regulation rules has become up in the market, right? Some of them maybe you're already operating in the MER region, where the rules like GDPR and other rules are there, right? So why these rules have come up? These rules have come up to protect the sensitive data. When I say the sensitive data, we're not talking about production data. As Beverly mentioned, it could be our internal database as well, right? And various surveys have indicated that internal threat is one of the biggest threat where the data leak happens, right? So you need to protect not only production data, archive data, test data, right? And how do I make sure that it is compliance? You need some kind of a process to tell that here are the places where my sensitive data are there. Even though a table, an application is there, I know this is sensitive data, but you need a process to identify and to take a validation from your data controller, right? So that's where the showing the kind of adhering to the compliance rules comes into picture. So when it comes to CA data, CA TDM, so we have a inbuilt unified PII audit process where it can go and scan the data which is there in your application, and we have a set of pre-rules, we call it as a classifier rules in the TDM world, where it can go and identify based on the rules which we have defined. We provide some of the out-of-the-box rules. Of course, you can always create your own based on requirement. And what it does is it goes and scans the data in your application, and it will gives back a kind of a report telling that when I did a scan against your data, this could be the potential sensitive data, right? Once you identify those data and you validate it, you can submit this report generated by the TDM to your internal security team to validate. Once they validate all these kind of rules, it gives a nice summary kind of a report, which we can use it to our internal auditors, where sometimes it is, even though we know that there is a secure data exists in this particular database, the internal rules tells that yearly once you need to be audited, right? So those kinds of reports it generates, and we can give to this kind of internal or external auditors to compliance in the to the rules and regulations of the organizations. If we are not compliant to this kind of regulations, what happens is our organization will be heavily penalized from monetary penalty, and they also lose the reputation in the market. So what we do
I have
is
a question. I have a question. So, like, as we are doing the QA or P, so there is a critical requirement that we need a production-like data, or like what we are doing a regular production data refresh so that it comes into the non-prod environment. And in that scenario, like this TDM really helps us, like to make sure the PI masking is there, to make sure like all the compliance is there, and in non-prod environment, although it is data being refreshed or it's like production like copy, but still nothing is breached from consumer perspective, and we are not able to access any sort of critical information. So how TDM can play a
so
role
there are
there?
multiple ways to do that. To answer your question in a high level, yes, right? So you can do a masking of your the production copy of data, and before taking out from production environment to lower environment, you mask it. Either you subset the data based on your slice conditions. But again, the production data, whatever you have, may not cover all the test scenarios, right? Because production data are the kind of happy data, we call it as, only the positive scenarios. So how do you generate the negative scenarios? So on top of this production data, which is masked and copied to lower environment, you can synthetically generate the data based on the business rules.
So all the edge case scenarios can
Exactly.
be
You
sort
can
of
define the rules and you can generate
okay.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we generate, we will have a look into this, the next use case which we are going to cover. You can generate in a various ways. You want to add something, Vijit? Long.
Yours was an interesting question because I think you asked about two aspects to it, right? And a lot of our customers are struggling with it, right? One aspect is, I would say, fairly established, which is you do masking of the data to scrub the data and things like that, right? The other important point which you touched upon is the assurance that whatever you have brought into the non-prod is really PII scrubbed. So for that, Raghav is going to be demoing that, but we have a functionality built into the product, which is called as PII audit, wherein essentially it's a workflow where a data analyst can first analyze it, right? And then it can go to a data controller or an internal auditor to get signed off, right? And you have a system of record in the system that the data has been scanned and there is no PII associated with it. So those two are the mechanisms which we support with very large banks to
Yeah.
do a production review.
Why I raise this point? Because what we have noticed, we have like lots of prod incidents happening. And we are trying to reproduce those production incidents in non-prod environment, like doing the defect retesting. Majority of time, the answer is we were not able to reproduce it. So, and it was just edge case scenario. So the leadership is asking, okay, whether our non-prod data is not impactful, why we are not able to identify those things pretty early in the cycle, or our QA is not like that great. But I think we have all automation and everything is happening. But so how we can bridge that particular gap and make sure we are providing our testers high quality data and similar to prod and something like that. So that's
So, I mean, just to add on to what Abhijit has mentioned, so probably we are not covering that. If you want to give this kind of a facility to your testers to do the self-service, or portal support as a self-service capabilities, where you build the kind of mechanism where they can go and do the self-service activities, find the data, or even copy a particular set of data from X to Y environment as a data cloning with the rows.
Yeah, just to add, right, that's a very pertinent problem. In fact, just a few years back, we commissioned a survey to analyze like the difference between production data and the coverage which it gives for like doing all of your test scenarios. And one of the findings was that although production data is very large in volume, it typically covers only 20% of the test cases. When you look at the entire gamut, right, the edge cases, like the boundary condition, negative scenarios and things like that. And hence, a lot of our customers have been using synthetic data generation and exposing that via self-service to provide that bridge between data coverage of a production environment to vis-a-vis what is needed.
definitely it helps. And one last question is like, as we are working for a bank, so we are highly dependent upon the legacy systems, that is mainframes. And to make sure like we are highly resilient and reliable, we have came up with a strategy of putting ROSes on top of mainframe, that is distributed database, read optimized store we are calling, and mainframe is a SOR. So do we have any strategy with respect to hydration patterns that, okay, that SOR is hydrating our ROS, and so this ROS is highly updated and it acts like a quick cache if any of the read request comes in rather than update. So any thought of strategies this TDM can help us for those hydration pipelines between SOR to ROS, mainframe to distributed?
So what technologies are you using on that top layer?
Top layer, like we have mainframe at the legacy, then we have like SQL HADR and like somewhere we have Solar and all those mechanisms. Yeah.
Okay. So we have some customer requests which we have addressed, wherein they are using more of these NoSQL databases as that store wherein they can get like quick query analytics. But those two specific things we don't support right now, but we could have like alternate approaches to do it. Maybe like once the session wraps up, we can talk more about that. But definitely we are looking at that approach wherein we want to support modern technology on top of legacy. Yeah, we do now support MongoDB along with Cassandra. So.
All right, so those are good questions. So what I'm going to show now is that the compliance policy, how do I make sure that my PII data exists and how TDM can support. So right now what you are seeing, this is the TDM portal, which is a web-based interface. I'm going to log into TDM and we'll proceed with those workflow. Right. So once you log into TDM, we have seen in one slide all the capabilities of the TDM. We can see. So on the left hand side, we can see the lot of capabilities what TDM supports: the modeling, the PII audit, the masking, the find and reserve, find the data, and data generation, self-service, and also few of the data which testers reserve for themselves coming under the my reservations. So we'll go to the section called configurations, where we have to tell to TDM that where is my application database, right? In our TDM concept, we call it as the connection profile. So connection profile defines what type of database TDM has to connect and what are the credentials for it. Right? So in this case, you see a SQL database being used, and we will just validate that from TDM we are able to connect to that database. Once we are done with the connection profiles, so we are ready to proceed with the next activities. Either you go with the creation of a new projects in your word, probably in application specific, right? You have a application, B application, C application. You can manage them as a separate project in the TDM, or you can leverage one of the projects which already exist if it is created before. So in this case, we are using the My TDM demo projects, and under the projects we can have a versions. So versions will help you to have the versions of the test data. So assume that your application is going through a release. One version is in a UAT, another version is a IT environment. So with the help of the project versions, you can maintain the two versions of the test data. So we are creating an environment. An environment is a collection of those connection profiles we created to tell that, okay, this is my application environment where this particular environment has 1, 2, 3 kind of databases. So here we are using one database called travel applications, but you can choose and you can add as many databases to define an environment. Once the environment is done, the next is to tell a TDM to scan that environment, and what it does is it goes and identifies the relationship maintained at the database level. We only capture the metadata like primary key, foreign key, a column names and its attribute types. So in general, sometimes the relationships are not maintained at the database level. So you do have applications like SAP where the relationships are not exist. In such cases, TDM can do an advanced scan. It can look into the data in the databases, and it can build that kind of relationship. Suppose the relationships have come, but you want to have you have a standalone table and you want to have a relationship with one of those tables. TDM allows you to define your own relationship at the application level. When I say application level, TDM level, it doesn't go and change the relationship at the database level. And if you have a relationship maintained in some kind of a document, those can be imported and it can be used in this tool. So at this point of time, what you're seeing is you are seeing a people table. It has a relationship with 5 tables in the application database. So we are switching to a different view called an ER diagram view, which represents the same information in a different view. If you click on a particular table, it will tell how many columns are there, how many relationships are there, and if you click on that, it gives the relationship details. So in order to proceed the next step to identify the sensitive data, we are going to proceed with an action called PII scan, personally identifiable information scan. When it does this scanning, it leverages the model which you have created before. And on top of that, we are applying a classifier packs. So these are the set of rules we define in the TDM to identify what is the sensitive information. And we are telling the PII scan what is the level of scanning we need to do. Whether do you want to do a simple scan or you want to also scan based on the data as well. So some of the settings, depending on requirement, we define either basic scan, 5% of scan, 10% of data. Right? So in this case, we'll simply do a column scan. And when we go to the next screen, so columns, the name of the column can be a string or a numeric. We can choose both of them. But this is an interesting factor is your application database may have, 10, 20, 30 tables. If you know what all the tables are sensitive information just to add to your internal audit, you can apply a filter over here and only do the scanning for those particular tables. This is just to demonstrate that how to add a new filter, but in this case, we'll proceed with the scanning the entire tables in the application. So once we do that, so what happens is we selected a set of rules. We have selected the data model. it will apply the rules on the data model which we have created, and the output of this will be a PII report, right? And of course, you can do a on-demand a PII scan, or you can also schedule, as per your convenience. So this output will be, we call it as in TDM language called a heat map. Heat map has a various color code to identify which table or which application database has more number of sensitive information based on the rules we have applied. The more sensitive rules, the color will be in the red color. And if it is less sensitive, high, medium, low, very low. And if the table doesn't have any PII data based on the rules we have applied, that particular table will be grayed out as a non-PII. So here, you can apply a lot of filters, but what we are going to do is we are going to pick 1 or 2 tables to demonstrate the PII report kind of capabilities. So once the scanning is done, we will investigate what is the output of this, right? So what I have done here is wanted to show the entire audit trail, whether the tool has identified rightly the PI information and what additional capability tool can provide if you are not able to find the PI data, right? So in this case, a particular column called photo_file name, it has identified as the PII data as the name, but we know that this is not a PII, so we are removing that column as a non-PII, right? So when we do that, the tool will ask why you are removing that, because each and every activity need to be logged, and those has to be audited as a part of PII identification process. So next is the credit card. So here you see credit card we have put, and the tool that's what I wanted to tell you. Tool has kind of put as a phone number, right? So it may happen that we have built the rules such a way that it matches the phone number pattern of 15 digits based on the data. And if this particular column is not right identified as the PI tag, so we are going to add a new tag called credit card. And when I added, it asks for the reason. And similarly, when I'm removing the the phone number, it is asking the reason for it. So we have done with the 2 tables. So just to complete the process, what we are going to do is we are going to remaining tables, we are simply select and we are marking that as a non-PII. And in this case also, if I want to do as a non-PII, why you are making these tables as non-PII? So we have identified all the tables. We have gone through all the tables to understand which are the sensitive, which are not sensitive. Now the next step is I'm going to create a report. The report will be in the PDF format. As the person I'm doing this activity, I'm downloading the report and see what is the output of this report. The output of the report is the steps which we have performed so far. We have done a scanning, we have applied a few classifier packs, and we have got the the heat map, right? So as a person who I have done this auditing activity, I can understand what is the output, and we have done some of the steps manually on the PI report. For example, photo_file name, we have removed that, and what is the reason and who has done that, right? So tomorrow, if the data controller or the internal audit team, why this particular tag or column is not been marked as PII, he or she will be able to identify any manual activity has been done or not, right? So, and these are the remaining tables. So the next step is an inbuilt workflow in the TDM where I will submit this report to my internal audit team for review. So if you see here, I submitted a report, and the person who's supposed to review is data_controller. So TDM offers a role-based access. You can control the a particular user, what permission he or she should have. So similarly, we have a data controller. This particular user has only permission to do the PII report sign-off, right? He or she will not be having access to other activities. Similarly, if you have other personas like testers, you can limit the access to them so that they only do a particular activities in the TDM. So now this is just to show the role-based access part in the TDM. But the interesting part is the data controller or the internal audit person is logging into the TDM portal with his or credentials. Once he or she logs in, you can see the options available for them to available in the TDM, right? Compared to the options available for the TDM administrator. So he will only have option to sign off the PI audit. So he'll go to the sign off screen. So for one of the report is waiting for his or her sign off. So same report will be available for them to download, which gives the similar information, what activities been done, who has done that, what all the fields been identified, and what is the rules has been applied. Right? So they can go through this report, and if they find any discrepancies, right, they can always reject the report and send back the this report back to the person who has done that to work on the feedback. Or if they are happy with the report, they can go and approve the this particular report, right? So once this report is approved, so this becomes your state of records where you can keep it internally for your yearly audit process. Once this report is signed off, it will be moved away from the sign off section and it will be available in the report section. So let's go back to the person who has submitted the report, and if he goes to the report section, he can see the report is approved, and here is the executive summary which I was talking about, where it gives the crisp information for our the business users and also for the auditors to see what happened and whether we followed all the required steps to identify the personal information. So this is the process which you have asked about, how do I make sure that the data really exists. So after that, what next? We'll cover in the subsequent use case. So this covers one use case about identifying the secure data, right? So once we identify the secure data, the next activity is how do I deliver this secure data, right? So how do I deliver this data to my app development team, my application, my testing team, right? So there are various methods you can deliver this sensitive data. One of them is the masking. The second one is the data subsetting.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, you have a question?
What we call that?
PII?
Yeah, TDM portal.
Yeah.
So I guess the example what we looked at is about SQL servers.
Yeah.
So does it make any difference when we are trying to connect to the mainframes, which is legacy systems, and the data from the legacy systems called DB2s?
You have a DB2 database running on a mainframe.
Yes.
So you will make the same connection profile which I did on the portal. You have seen for SQL, and rest of the activities remain same.
So does it need some many extra security layers or something? So which is
Security layers. It's a JDBC connection.
JDBC connection.
JDBC connection.
Okay.
vSAM, I don't think we have at this.
Is in the roadmap in terms of to build it in the portal, but we started with DB2 because that was the most common things. vSAM already has an interface through our legacy data maker tool, but not through
Not the PII scan part. You are looking for PII scan part? You have a particular use case which we can discuss later? We do support vSAM, but we need to understand what use case you want to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
No.
Okay.
No, thank
Yeah.
you.
So, and also, I think someone talked about MongoDB large scale database, right? Nowadays, AI, ML, all this comes into picture, right? And how do I make sure that the data residing on those large scale databases also, or the LLM models, needs to be covered as well. So we do support those NoSQL database like MongoDB to support that, and we do often see that a lot of customers environment or the organizations, they're coming up with the data science teams, and they are coming with their own LLM models. You have a few set of data to train, but you need a more data, and an LLM model requires huge amount of data to train. So how do I cover those scenarios, right? So that's where one of the use case which I'm going to cover is how synthetically generate those data. So the database which we are going to use is a NoSQL to tell that it supports, but our tool supports the traditional RDBMS as well. So before I move to the showing the demo part, so on the left hand side you can see the various data types, whether it's a structured data or a semi-structured data, or data residing in the cloud data sources like MongoDB or the NoSQL data, and you have a data legacy applications like mainframe. So TDM can help to deliver those data into the lower environment in a secured way, right? And one of the use case which we are going to cover is the how to generate the synthetic data for the NoSQL. So before I run this, few things I wanted to set up, because you can directly see here we are going to the environment section. But if you have a MongoDB database, the steps like creating a connection profile remains same. I'm not covered here, and unless you have a connection profile, you can't proceed, right? So those prerequisites just skip it over here. So moving next step, we are creating a MongoDB environment. And MongoDB could be on a local server, it could be running on a container, it could be on a SaaS platform. It doesn't matter for TDM application. As long as we're able to connect from portal, we can use any of those infrastructures. So the output of the scanning is a list of tables available in the MongoDB. So to simplify this demo, so we have a MongoDB instance with 3 tables: accounts, customer, and transactions. And this is the MongoDB compass if you have used MongoDB. So before I jump on to MongoDB, do you know what is a MongoDB? NoSQL database. So compared to traditional RDBMS, NoSQL doesn't have a particular structures. This many columns, this many, this table. So this is a semi-structured data on the JSON format. It takes a while to stop. So it's in the JSON format, and it can have one document can have 10 JSON element, another can have 11, 12, like that, right? So how do we identify such kind of data, right? So one of the prerequisites to achieve this synthetic data generation, TDM cannot understand if you don't have any data in the NoSQL database. So our requirement is at least you should have one data. A table has at least one collection documents. So based on that, it can go and scan that, and it can give that element of that JSON having, right? So it has an account ID, bucket underscore start date, and it has an array of transactions, and it could be complex as you can see over here, and it can have some other individual elements. So this is the data model, it has come. So why we need a data model? Because we are going to generate the data synthetically. If I don't know what is the data type, I will not be able to apply rules required to generate integer, string, or a data and time. So this is the one JSON element we have in the MongoDB. And for here you can see ID, account underscore ID, which matches with what TDM has identified. So once we have the data model ready, we'll go to the data generation part. So we'll give a definition, a metadata definition, for the data generation, and we will choose the table against which we are going to generate the data, right? And the TDM, suppose today you want to generate the data in a directly database, but tomorrow you have a requirement to generate the data in file format. The advantage over here is you don't have to come and define the rules every time. The single rules can be used to generate the data in various formats. So these are all the set of rules. TDM offers a lot of out-of-the-box set of rules which we can use and generate the data. And like JSON data, some of the elements can be optional, can be null, can be exclude. So all those options are available in the data generation rules where we can ignore them. And also we talked about one collections, and here you can generate the collections randomly, how many number of records you want, right? And suppose you have a conditions where you want to generate the data to a column based on the value available in other column. So it can go back and reference the data and it can build that. So in this example, you can see we're generating the end date based on the start date, and we're adding 45 days to it, right? So similarly, you can navigate and identify different columns and build for rules. So rules were available, it's available in the format of numeric, string, date. Even it can go and query the data in other database, right? For example, you have a data in other database, it can query and get the data. So I'll just maybe move on to the set of rules because we have few set of rules.
Just like MongoDB, it supports other NoSQL databases, also Cassandra.
We support MongoDB, Cassandra, BigQuery at this point of time, and we are in the pipeline to support a few others. So he was about to cover those. That's why I didn't mention that it's in the roadmap. That's a good question. Yeah. So we are in a publish phase. So we are done with the rules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish that. And here you can see we can publish to a connection profile, nothing but to a target database, or we can publish to a file format, right? So we are publishing to a database directly, and we have to choose the connection profile where we want to publish and how many records we want to publish, right? So this could be today 75, tomorrow 200, maybe 10,000, like that. You just have to come and click publish and change the numbers. And again, if you are using CI/CD kind of a pipeline, whatever activities you see in the portal, everything can be called by APIs. So 75 records want to generate. So we have submitted records to generate 75. It gives a job ID, and it takes a moment depending on number of records we want to create. So let's wait for a few seconds. It's completed. The reason we have recorded because it gives a flexibility to stop, start, rewind, and and forward wherever we want, right? So, and here you can see we have it took 75 records. It took around 4 seconds. And if I come back and refresh my MongoDB, initially it was 1 record. So 75 plus 1, it got 76 records. And all these records are generated synthetically based on the business rules which I want, right? Production-like data. Am I good in time? Okay. Yeah. So each data is different. It's not a static data. If you see, everything is a different, right? So, and some of the data are, for example, here total is based on the calculation of some other elements. So you can build as complex as possible. You can club more than one rules and make it even complex. So next, we have identified the PI data. We have delivered a PI data in the form of synthetic data. But I do have a production data. How do I give them to my lower environment, non-production environment, right? So in this case, we would like to take the sorry, it is little bit slow. The moment I click here and the moment it comes here. Okay, we are good. So cloud testing, right? So this is a very interesting topic. Um, the way we test an application on premise and the way we test the application on the cloud is a different way, right? It is not just simply take the data from on premise, migrate to cloud, right? When we do that, we have to make sure a lot of aspects: the data integrity, did I lose any data, or the data which I copied from from the on premise to the cloud, will it cover my all use cases? Is it fit to use, right? And of course we talked about the cloud databases like MongoDB. How do we support, right? And when we do this kind of migrations, we do happens to see that a lot of amount of data being copied to the cloud environment. And how do I leverage those data? And with leveraging the cloud's elasticity, scalability kind of approach, how can we leverage those cloud features in the TDM to make sure that how quick, how fast we can mask those data in the from the TDM, right? So before I demonstrate, so in TDM, as I mentioned, we can deploy on premise and we can also support deployment in the Kubernetes environment as well. When you deploy the TDM in the Kubernetes environment, that's where as a tool we can leverage the Kubernetes flexibility and elasticity and the scalabilities. When I mentioned this word about scalability, so when you do a masking of huge amount of data, obviously you want to finish this masking in a quick amount of time. So how can we support over here, right? So TDM can understand automatically based on the amount of data you are planning to mask. It can automatically horizontally scale the masking engine, right? The amount of masking engine required based on the data, the additional masking pods in the Kubernetes world comes up, does the masking activities, and once the masking activity is done, those pods will be terminated by itself. So in this way, we are trying to help the customers who are trying to migrate to the cloud environment and also to accelerate their cloud testing with the help of providing a way to mask the large amount of data. And I think I covered this part as at the same time we also would like to do as much automation as possible in all these aspects. So we do have support the APIs to connect with your favorite CI/CD pipelines like Jenkins or even the Azure pipeline, because we have an API. You just need to call them based on the pipeline we use, and these maskings we support from the mainframe to the file-based systems to the RDBMS and to the NoSQL databases as well.
You talked about like Kubernetes installation of TDM. So is it something available on AKS, that is on Azure, as well as EKS on AWS?
That's a good question. So we support almost all public cloud providers: Azure, AWS, GCP, OpenShift. And if you have your own cloud platforms, or maybe need private, or maybe you set up your own internal Kubernetes, in the lab, we support all of them. So we will just have a quick demo of that part. So in this case, what we have done is, okay, I have to be a little bit slow in here. So few prerequisites has been skipped over here. I will just mention what all those. One is the connection profile, the model scan, and the PII scan has been done already. So this is the heat map which you have seen in the first use case, right? So we are using a database which has large amount of data. Each table has 1 million plus number of records. So to demonstrate that, we will pick few large tables, let's say 4 to 5 tables, and we will do the auto scale masking with those tables. Okay. So you can just see if I hover my mouse over here, it gives the count of number of records. So how this count came, because we did a scan, model scan, and TDM understood that what is the count in the table. So we will confirm few tables as the large tables to mask. Is a similar activity we did before, confirm those tables. And we have done for one table. Likewise, we'll do for 4 more. I'll quickly maybe skip this confirmation part. Okay, so we have selected 4 tables. Those are big tables, 1,000,000 plus records. So technically, after you do the PII scan, that's what we did before, you'll come to the masking part, right? So based on the PII, I'm finished. Yeah. So based on the PII we have done, so TDM automatically identify what is the masking rules needs to be applied. So if you see over here, the first table which we select is the, okay, let's switch to the table screen. Yeah. So if I expand the person table, we have, this is a tag came from the PII scan. So based on the tag, the TDM automatically defines the masking rules. Of course, you can add or change masking rules. If we provide a lot of masking rules, plus we also provide the ability to build your own masking rules. The next step is to submit the masking, and when we submit the masking, a lot of options are available to improvise or to select the masking specific activities. So we'll keep, for this demonstration purpose, we'll keep most of them as a default. And here, instead of scanning for doing the masking for all the tables, we have an option to mask only those tables which we have confirmed as the PII, and rest we can untouch them. And there are a couple of other options available. You can choose based on the requirement. So this is the summary page of the masking. Again, the masking can be on demand or a scheduled. You can schedule on a Friday evening, and when you're back on the Monday morning, the job would have finished. So before I submit the job, so this portal which we are seeing is running on a Kubernetes. So we have 4 pods. One is the masking pod, the TDM web, and the OrientDB which is required for the portal, and as a messaging pod we have, right? And at the back end in the TDM, it understands that how many masking jobs are currently running. Since we are not submitted any job, you can see the count as 0. And as soon as I submit a masking job, the number is going to change. And this is configurable in the TDM when you create when you deploy the TDM on the Kubernetes environment. So before I submit the masking, so there is a pop-up screen, so which also tells that one of the compliance rules that if you do a masking, those data should not be irreversible, right? So whatever once you do the masking, the data is very difficult to reverse. So now the masking has submitted, and it takes 30 minutes to pick up based on the right now we have configured for 30 minutes. And since one masking pod is running, it already picked that table to mask, and it is waiting for the additional pods to come up and to mask the remaining tables. So we are not doing any manual activities. We have let the TDM to identify how many masking rules required to do that, and let it handle. Once it does, it automatically terminates. So now you can see this is the additional pod is created. So what is the advantage over here, right? So when you do a large scale masking, sometimes you don't know how many masking pods required. And we did had this kind of a capability before, where sometimes you have to pre-calculate how many masking jobs required, how many amount of data. So everything we have kind of removed those kind of things, and by leveraging the cloud's elasticity and scalability, so we are automatically able to calculate how many masking jobs required, how many masking containers required. See here in this case, 2 are already up and running, and the third one is yet to come up. So as soon as this comes up, the masking will be assigned to that particular pod, and it starts doing masking. right now. 2 are running, so you can see 2 jobs running, and third one is about to come up. And the out of 5 tables, 1 is already completed. That's why you can see the count 4, right? I'll quickly move. Yeah, now you can see here there are 3 masking pods up and running. All are 3 running, and in the portal also you will see the masking is assigned to those pods. And wherever wherever the masking is finished, you can see a duration. That means this masking is finished. It took around 84 seconds to mask around 1,000,000 plus records. Quickly move a little bit to show the end result. Oops, sorry. Okay. Now, I think we are left with only one container activity. Everything is finished, complete. So we have masked around 5 million plus records, around 4 minutes time. And since the masking is finished, let's see what is happening for those masking containers. Right? So those were up and running. So now the TDM web will tell to the masking engine that whatever masking supposed to happen, it is finished. Now you see this value is coming back to 0. And after a few seconds, all these masking pods which have come up are starting to terminate. Right? So the advantage here is you can save this cost of the cloud. No need to worry about, okay, is my masking pods up and running, and do I incur additional cost? So everything is auto scaled and it's a horizontal scaling. So I think with this, probably wanted to cover these 3 important aspects. If you have any questions before I hand over to Abhijit, who's going to talk about very interesting things coming in the pipeline for TDM.
At the time it is trying to mask all the data, it automatically commits in the dev environment, or it holds somewhere, which leads some good amount of virtual storage or RAM to hold that data, because it is trying to mask huge amount of data as well.
Yeah. So here, what we have demonstrated is a in-place masking. It's a database only masking. And if you notice that there is something settings called masking settings. So you can define how much record the TDM should fetch at one time, and how much it should commit back to the database. All configurations you can do on the masking jobs. It doesn't store anywhere. So everything on the fly does masking and commits to the database. And TDM as an application doesn't hold any of your sensitive data. It's nowhere stored in the TDM.
Yeah.
Only the job ID, how much time it took, what is the connection profile connected. That's it. It doesn't know, what is the data is masked or nothing.
Okay.
For these masking jobs, we are getting all the reports from the audit purpose.
Sorry?
For all these masking jobs, we are getting the dedicated reports which we can utilize for our audit purpose.
Yes, so there is 2 ways to do that. One is we also offer something called running in a simulation mode. You can run that. I can see that the rules which I applied is perfect or not. Or along with the masking, you can also generate the audit report. And those audit reports can be secured as well by providing the password as well, so that only one person should know. Someone can access to the TDM and he downloads without the password, he cannot open the audit report.
And initially you've shown like for respective countries. So all those rules and regulations are keep on updating